Good morning, everybody. My name is Arianna Mereu, and I am speaking to you from the beautiful venue of Villa Favard, which is the headquarters of Polimoda in Florence. So yeah, I am working here at Polimoda as a professor. I will just briefly introduce myself. I'm teaching trend forecasting and strategic foresight to textile students, fashion trend forecasting students, fashion business students. So always talking about fashion futures. And that is exactly the topic that I'm going to talk to you about today. Futures of fashion in different perspectives, let's say, because we'll talk about innovative materials, innovative production methodologies, and even philosophies, I would say. And when you talk about these kind of topics, you cannot skip sustainability, which is not just a buzzword, but it's something really, really crucial to the industry today. So, sustainability and fashion, I think that we all heard a lot about that, but now there is also, like talking about futures, there is also a new, let's say, perspective on it, which is digital fashion, right? So everybody's talking about NFTs possibly being the future of sustainable design, because I mean, you are not producing garments, right? So you're not like polluting the environment with dyes or with the CO2 emissions that are necessary across all the supply chain. So there are a lot of digital fashion houses nowadays. Like I'm thinking about the Fabricant. The Fabricant was the first exclusively digital fashion firm to sell digital outfit, so basically an NFT, for over $9,000. So it made a sensation a couple of years ago. Or Dress X, where you can just download your digital wardrobe, and that made collaborations with Adidas, with Bershka. So it's really like this idea of having a digital wardrobe which is more sustainable, so that you can, show your fantastic outfit digitally on your Instagram profile, on your TikTok videos, without actually harming the environment. But is it true? I don't think so. So it's been proven actually that to mine for an NFT, so to produce the necessary energy to make all those servers run and produce continuously the amount of digital information which is required to produce digital fashions, and not only fashions, but in general products, you would need you would produce, over 200 kilos of CO2. So basically, it would take over 3 trees to compensate the lifetime of an NFT. So it's actually got a large impact on the environment, right? So probably it's not even the right solution. Then, of course, we don't have to forget that, I mean, we will always have to dress the body, right? So, okay, with all this digital experimentation, and welcome artificial intelligence, which is the other hot topic of 2023. But in the end, the fashion industry is and will always be about clothing the body. So after this little introduction, let's talk about the fashion industry, right? So what is sustainability after all? So if it's not the digital product, if it's not only, as we know, natural fibers, what is sustainability? Well, there is an aspect of sustainability that is very, very crucial, that is hardly ever talked about, which is the social sustainability. So we all know what happened in 2013 in Bangladesh, the Rana Plaza incident that started a conversation about how we are producing our clothes, and started movements like fashion revolution. So over 1,000 people were killed during this incident that basically was a collapsing building in Bangladesh, where a lot of north of the world brands were producing their collections, like Il Corte Inglés, Bon Marché, Benetton, Mango, so Zara, Primark, so just name it, a lot of brands. And the really concerning thing is that many of these brands didn't even know that they were producing there, because the supply chain was so unclear, so foggy for the brands themselves, that they genuinely didn't know that they were subcontracting their collections to endless sub-suppliers until it came to a tragedy. So it's not only about producing garments in unsafe conditions, but it's also about the people who make these garments. So we know that in some countries, it's a terminology that I really hate because it sounds very colonialist, but in the so-called supplying countries, the people that are producing the garments are not paid the living wage, but they are paying the minimum wage. What is the difference between that? You already know probably, but basically the minimum wage is the salary that a worker is taking according to the job laws of that country. So a company is obliged to pay that minimum to a worker to be legal. And the living wage is the salary that would cover very basic needs of the worker to afford a decent way of living, such as food, of course, clothing, education, healthcare, and we're talking about very basic healthcare. Think about period products for the women, and transport from home to work, a rent, paying a rent, which is not, again, a fancy location or anything, even a room in a shared apartment with other people. So, well, the minimum wage doesn't cover all of these needs. So usually people in these countries live in the working premises because they cannot afford a rent, so they live where they work. Of course, education is the first thing that is checked out from this list. Healthcare is not possible, even very basic healthcare. And, according to a very recent poll, out of 38 big fashion brands all across the globe, just try and guess how many are paying their workers in the supplying countries living wage instead of the minimum wage. Actually, the answer is 0, none of them. So it's a this is a big problem of the fashion industry, because just increasing the salary of the workers from the minimum wage to the living wage would allow these people to live decently and would, in the end, not affect that much the cost of the garments. Just think that, just to give you a quote, an average $29 t-shirt, let's say that this t-shirt is a fast fashion t-shirt produced paying the worker a minimum wage, would cost just less than $31, if the worker was paid a living wage. So that's quite shocking, I mean, because people would still buy that t-shirt, right? And it would be a life changer for these people that are working in the industry. Brands are not doing it just because they can afford not to do that, because people are not aware of it. And it's a cost that they can, at the end of the day, they can easily avoid. So the problem is a systemic problem. The problem of sustainability is not about the use of a single fiber, is not about only, single aspects that affect the garments, but it's a systemic approach that should change The approach of fast fashion, for example, just think that Shein is producing 300,000 garments a day, and this is only Shein, and it makes up to I don't know, over 100 million new garments every year. That is only Shein. We have to add all the other fast fashions to the calculation. So it's just huge. So it means that fast fashion is not that cheap, right? It's got a high cost. It's only that someone else, somewhere else is paying for it. Like, just think about the landfills, the massive landfills made of textile waste that are piling up in remote areas of the world, like in Africa or in the desert of Atacama in Chile. Now it's visible from the satellite, and the shocking thing is that most of these garments are not like used garments that were just disposed of and thrown away, but they are new, just overproduction. So, well, it's obvious that the system needs a rethinking, and to rethink the system, actually, there are some strategies and some innovations that could come very, very handy, and that we can be inspired by. So, for example, some researchers say that just prolonging the lifetime of the garments is actually having a very, very positive effect on the environment. And companies are talking more and more about circular production. Just think about the circular jacket by Napapiri, for example, which is completely made of nylon. Even the accessories, so even the zippers, the buttons, the labels, so everything is mono material, and can be completely shredded and melted and recycled, and in a completely new recycled, let's say, nylon yarn to make other jackets and other garments. The brand is also implementing and encouraging the customers to bring back the old jackets, but no sooner than 3 years after purchase. So also encouraging a behavior which is not just use and dispose. But I think that the most interesting innovation in the manufacturing panorama is the so-called symbiotic manufacturing. So what is a symbiotic manufacturing? Is the idea of creating production system that instead of harming the planet, but let's say polluting the environment, are trying to create a balance, a harmony, or even improving the environment, which is just amazing if you think about it. It looks like alchemy, it looks like impossible, but there are companies that found a way to, for example, convert their own CO2 emissions, capture these CO2 emissions, and turn, through some chemical processes, turn them into cellulose. So adding some molecules, I'm sorry, I'm not a chemist, okay, so I'm explaining it in a very basic way probably, but adding some substances to the CO2 that they emit through their production processes, they can transform the CO2 into cellulose, that it's turned into a filament, that it's turned into a garment, that will produce CO2 emissions to be produced, and this CO2 again is turned into new cellulose to produce new garments. So it's a symbiotic production because it's transforming the pollution that the company is producing into an actual material. So that's insane, no? It's incredible, and it applies also to other industries actually, because through my researches, I found that there is a vodka made this way. It's called air vodka. I'm not doing a paid advertising here, but just to let you know that this vodka is obtained by transforming CO2 into alcohol. So it's definitely possible to actually transform pollution into something interesting. This idea of transforming a waste into something beautiful, into something new, is also quite what is happening with innovations around materials. So, for example, orange fiber. Orange fiber was one of the first example of this. A cellulosic fiber obtained by the waste of the orange industry. So, of course, the orange industry was using the fruit, but not the peel of the fruits. So, this Italian startup extracted the cellulose from the peels of the oranges and made this quite silky, like cellulose yarn to produce fabrics. So that gave the start to many innovations. Many of those are also in the field of the imitation leathers, right? So, for example, leather underwent a history of imitation. The first imitations were plastic, so not very sustainable after all. The second wave of imitation was the plant-based leather. So we have Deserto, for example, is a very interesting innovation. It's a Mexican startup that makes an imitation leather using cactus as a fiber. And it is very interesting because it's one of the few plant-based leathers, let's say, that doesn't need a polyurethane covering. So it's completely recyclable and completely sustainable. That's really interesting. The only thing is that these innovations are still in a phase where they are not completely scalable. So they work well on a small dimension, but they struggle in finding, a dimension which is a bit bigger. And the third wave of imitating leather is the grown in lab leather. So a single biopsy from a living cow, so you extract the cell from a living cow that then lives happily ever after, can be grown in a laboratory to recreate the leather, which is biologically and by any aspect identical, no, to natural leather. So just imagine that Caring Group just joined funding to research on this kind of materials, a funding of more than 47 million euros. So there is a high interest in the industry about that. And just imagine, I don't know, growing a bag in a mold, no? So that you also skip all the, let's say, cutting, no, parts. So just growing exactly the material that you need. This would eliminate waste. This would also eliminate all the possible pollution of the tanning, all that toxic part of the leather industry that are very, very impactful on the environment. Then, of course, we have innovation. Another thing that is really polluting in the fashion industry is the dyeing process. And one of the most interesting, and I think also for denim, this could be really an interesting innovation, is the so-called structural colors. So the idea, instead of dyeing, to have this superficial treatment, which are basically nanoprisms that reflect the light in a certain way, creating in our eye the illusion of seeing a color on the surface. So tricking the human eye in perceiving a color where actually there isn't, which is the same thing of the wings of the butterflies I learned. So imitating nature and coexisting with nature can actually bring to very, very interesting innovation, and probably to a sustainability which is less greenwashing and more authentic. Thank you very much.
Ciao, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good, thank you.
Oh,
It's
very nice.
so exciting to be here. I'm super happy. And I'm happy that people are asking for the presentation with the examples, which I'm very, very happy to share.
So this is amazing because we are going to share right now, and everybody is going to have like the presentation. Gente, vayan a folletos o ofertas y ahí van a poder descargar la presentación de Arianna, ¿ok? Y por favor, déjenme saber si ustedes tienen alguna pregunta en el chat sobre cualquier ejemplo que haya dado Arianna, por favor, pregúntenme. You know, Arianna, that it's very nice when you can see. I think I remind of my my university experience, because I really like the teacher when they show me patience. It's like, oh, you can see that because this is going to be crazy, it's incredible, amazing. And I think that this is the way when I finish my university, the why I pick some different models to work in group, on a teamwork, in different kinds of company, because it's so important, the solid basement, the foundation that you give to the students. So thank you so much for contagious emotion and patience with us, really.
Thank you so much. I always tell my students I really strongly try to be the professor that I would have loved to have as a student. And also one very important thing is that I learn a lot from them as well, because young people, creative people, and Polimoda is a very international environment with a lot of talents. So it's I think it works when it's a two ways exchange somehow, no?
Yeah. So, no me pregunten por mi chat privado, pregunten directamente en el chat, because they are asking me in the private chat. And I'm telling them, no, put in the chat, but it's somebody here that is asking about what kind of course you can recommend to Carolina about textiles in Polimoda, if you have.
Yeah, okay. I absolutely, we do. I am actually the leading teacher of the new master in textiles that was started at Polimoda under the mentorship of Lee Edelcourt. And for the ones of you that are not familiar with this name, she is probably the most important trend forecaster alive. And she's also pretty much into every industry, I would say, but in particular the textile industry. And the master is very into the philosophy of following also the things that I said in my speech before. The industry needs rethink, needs innovation, together with reappropriating also of the wisdom that we used to have in the past, probably, and the knowledge that comes from nature, that comes also from knowing that if a t-shirt costs €5, then probably we have a problem, right? Like this supply chain is a bit to be rethought. So we decided to at Polimoda to have this master. It's a 2 years master. It's called From Farm to Fabric to Fashion. And it's very, very radical. When we say from farm, it's because, for example, our students, when they study wool, they are sent in a rural farm in Holland to live together with the animals and learn exactly where wool comes from. And so all the first year is about learning about the fibers specifically. And then the construction methods. So we have weaving laboratories, and knitting and macrame and all the making. After they learn how to spin the fibers, they learn how to weave. And then the second year is about doing something with these fabrics that they learn how to make from scratch, starting from nature, and doing a fashion project that represents a bit their manifesto towards fashion. So we're having incredible results. I would like to enroll the master as a student sometimes because what they do is amazing.
in a good way, it's not only about the theory, but also the practice. Amazing.
No, they do. They make things like it's all hands-on. Every fiber has a separate workshop where they work for weeks on a fiber. For example, on linen, they learn how to extract, the fiber from the flax plant, and then they work it and they make the thread. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer one people in here.
Yeah.
Joel, toda esa charla, ahora les voy a traducir un cachín, estábamos preguntando, porque Carolina le preguntó si había algún curso directamente de textiles, entonces ella contesta que hay 2 másters que en la facultad de Polimoda, que son como excelencia en la parte educativa de fashion, ellos ayudan no solamente en la parte teórica, pero también en la parte práctica, son másters de 2 años, donde ustedes se pueden profundizar en la temática que quieran, desde la parte de cultivo, crecimiento de la fibra, terminaciones de tejidos y entrega, y también algo un poco más conceptual. Así que cualquier duda que tengan, busquen. Yo dejé Polimoda, el mail para que puedan tener en cuenta, el sitio para que puedan visitar, y voy a agradecer ahora a Arianna porque tenemos que ir a la otra charla. Arianna, grazie mille. Thank you so much for your participation here. Always when Polimoda support our event, I think that's the best thing. It's the content that you bring to us. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Gracias a todos.
Yes. Ciao.